Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Anita Levine's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai mi yagur ba'oholecha, mi yishkon bahar kodshecha. A psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit, have no slander upon your tongue, do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates. Accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. Mizmor leDavid Adonai roi lo echsar, binot deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni. A psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Ach tov v'chesed yirדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. Eshet chayil miyimsa v'rachok mipnini michra. What a precious find is an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. She is good to him, never bad, all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband praises her and says, "Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all." Charm is deceitful and beauty vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. This is my prayer to you, my God. Let not my spirit wither and shrivel in its thirst for you, and lose the dew with which you sprinkled it when I was young. May my heart be open to every broken soul, to orphaned life, to every stumbler wandering unknown and groping in the shadow. Bless my eyes, purify me to see. humanity's beauty rise in the world, and the glory of my people in its redeemed land, spreading its fragrance over all the earth. Deepen and broaden my senses to absorb a fresh, green, flowering world, to take from it the secret of blossoming in silence. Grant strength to yield fine fruits, quintessence of my life, steeped in my very being, without expectation of reward. And when my time comes, let me slip into the night, demanding nothing, God, of humanity or of you. A good person, though taken from us too soon, will rest in peace. For honor in old age does not come from length of life. Honor in old age does not come from length of years. Understanding is the gray hair of humanity. A blameless life is ripeness of age. Perfection in limited years is like living for many years. So a good person, though taken from us too soon, will rest in peace. Let us then, with peace of mind, let that good soul rest. At this time, a number of those who loved Anita will share some thoughts. I'm going to give the order of speakers now, and then you can just come up one after another. Alan will speak first, then Max, then Daniel's sons Larry and Harry, and finally Daniel.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. It gives me great comfort in all of us mourners. Anita was my loving wife for 45 years. She was kind and considerate to all, always willing to listen, but also share her beliefs. Anita was a lady. She never projected herself unnecessarily, but did not shrink from her strong convictions. She was elegant and thoughtful. Anita was universally admired. One of her greatest pleasures was getting together with her Pittsburgh friends, Judy Berkman, Richard Krupp, Judy Grummet, Judy Grotstein. I think almost every girl in Pittsburgh was named Judy in 1946, and Suzanne Kessler. Okay. If you were an outsider such as myself, that is not from Pittsburgh, you could not get a word in edgewise in this Pittsburgh bubble. Anita was brilliant and had a photographic memory. She remembered every conversation and every detail of what happened in elementary school that occurred. Her friend Richard called her Miss Brainbox. She walked 3 miles every morning with her good friends, Becky Smigel and Moira Levesque, then a mile at lunchtime and after dinner with me. Anita was also loved by her retired teachers group from Flower Hill Elementary School in Gaithersburg, Ellen, Eileen, Zena, Faith, Gail, and Bonnie. They played canasta or mahjong every Tuesday for years. Anita retired from teaching art in elementary school 12 years ago, but never lagged for exciting pursuits. She was an avid reader, checking out 2 to 3 library books a week. For those of you who don't know, Anita taught in New Jersey. Yeah, that's true. In her early years, and handled tough and bigger kids in class with ease. Her school children came from every background, but she awakened in them creativity and imagination. Her art lessons were sophisticated, each centering around a style of a particular artist. Matisse, one of her favorites, Van Gogh, and Jackson Pollock, giving students the tools of self-expression and the joy of art. She then came to Washington, D.C. and lived down the street from me in Southwest D.C., where a mutual friend introduced us. It was the proverbial love at first sight. We married in 1976 in Philadelphia and lived in the Van Ness South Apartments just off Connecticut Avenue in upper Northwest D.C. I remember we once set up a badminton set across the street on a Sunday, went to work on Monday, and when we came back, found that the net had been bulldozed for a new apartment building. This taught us a lesson, just a moment about the vagaries of life and perhaps a signal to enjoy every day of your life together. Anita was always very close with her beautiful sisters, Ray Waldman, called Susie, and Miriam Sierra, and their husbands, Ralph and Joe. We visited each other many times in Philadelphia and, of course, in Maryland. Anita was very close with Susie and Ralph's daughters, Hillary and Suzanne, and Miriam's sons, Matt and David. All have wonderful families of their own. Anita's greatest love was, of course, our children, Daniel, a.k.a. Danny or Dan, and Max, a.k.a. Max. They each have wonderful families of their own, Larry and Harry, who will shortly speak. I can't follow them or I would be embarrassed. And Max's very young children, Benjamin and Lily. You can see the care and nurturing that Anita gave to our sons in the way they act and nurture their children. Anita always told them to do the right thing. She was so proud of Daniel, who has his own long-term investment company, and Max, a partner and head of U.S. tax for Linklaters, an international law firm. She loved our daughters-in-law, Jessica Tish and Erica Temmel, the first an accomplished leader in public service in New York City, and the other a superb lawyer. Now we have a standing joke in the family. Max went to Brown, as did I and my mother, Pembroke class of 1935. But many of our in-laws went to Cornell. Anita and I laughed when we pondered where these grandchildren would go. But Anita also kept the hope that someone might go to her alma mater, Penn State. There, Anita excelled, majoring in art history, studying abroad at the London School of Design, and achieving the highest academic ranking at Penn State as an Evan Pugh Scholar. As I worked through the years, first as an attorney and supervisor in the Office of Chief Counsel, IRS, and for the last 13 years as the Chief Counsel for the Office of Tax and Revenue, District of Columbia, I could always count on wise advice from Anita on many matters, or even sometimes tax issues, without, of course, mentioning names or divulging taxpayer information. Anita and I, as I'm sure for many of you in your own particular situations, were unable to see our sons and grandchildren because of COVID for a very long time. Last week, we were basking in the light of our visit to New York City a month ago for Larry's 10-year-old birthday party. We were so delighted that we finally saw everyone, and I think we will always treasure the memory that Anita was there. I don't want to steal Larry's thunder, and I won't go into detail, but he will tell you a story about how Anita in the 1960s met a former president in the White House. We will also hear from Larry's 6-year-old brother, Harry. When we visited New York recently, Harry stayed with us in the hotel and slept in a king-size bed with Anita. He built a pillow fort out of 4 pillows. Don't ask me what that is. Okay. And I, having escaped to another bed, found out that from Anita that he slept horizontally. Anita said she had no room, but she really didn't mind. Max's 2 children, Benjamin and Lily, are younger, and we love them all dearly and equally. Anita was taken from us much too early. She was vibrant and seemingly healthy. Last Sunday, we walked 5 miles, greeted neighbors, dined out, and watched our favorite TV shows. We discussed our future travel plans and where would it be safe to go. Scotland, perhaps, was on our short list for a fun place to explore. Anita was the love of my life and loved by so many others. We all loved Anita and will miss her always. Okay.
Mom, I am grateful that you and Dad came to visit us in October, to spend time with us and the kids. This was a full grandparent experience visit. Dinners with all of us together, taking Ben and Lily to the zoo, to the playground, and for ice cream. Taking Ben for a haircut, an activity he loves, which was made all the more special because it was with Grandma and Grandpa. Thank you. Having Harry sleep over at your hotel room and playing board games together, and Larry's soccer game that we watched together. When Mom would come with my dad to visit our kids, they would be immediately scooped up in her embrace, and the world around didn't exist. All that mattered was showing the kids her unbounded love with Mom's doting attention, and they were whisked away to explore the next great adventure she had planned. My mom, a dedicated art teacher, and an anchor of the Flower Hill Elementary School, among other schools. Aside from art projects we would do at home, my favorites, the papier-mâché balloon and marbling paper, Mom taught many elementary school students how life is enriched with imagination and creativity. Once I moved to New York, my mom turned my childhood bedroom into her own art studio. Many people might miss their bedroom, but I was elated that my mom continued with the forms of expression that were so dear to her, with a Jim Henson poster that she hung on the wall in the background. My mom, Chaya, the daughter of Lazer Mendel, and Leiki, or Leah. She was named for her grandfather, Eli Chaim, or Hyman. She loved joining Shabbat services every week and the joyful tunes. Of the many gifts she bestowed to us, one of the ones that I am most grateful for was that she and my dad chose to emphasize our Jewish and moral education. In our case, this meant sending us to the Jewish day school. It was important to my mom that we receive a moral education and not just memorize facts. I think that point was only said once or twice to me when I was very young, but it stuck with me and left a lasting impression. Being a good person, doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do, treating people with respect, reaching out to anyone in her orbit to care for them was important to Mom, and it was how she lived her life. Anyone who lived in Washington, D.C., or in the nearby radius, myself included, knew that a Sunday brunch invitation was on offer. This was Mom's embrace that was freely available and purely motivated by a desire to make the person know that Mom cared about them. My mom would sometimes say, just among us, and in a lighthearted way, you can't beat brains. Our daughter Lily is 1.5 years old, and she is named after my mom's mom, my booby, Lillian Bernstein. I have vivid memories of my boobie's sharp intellect and insightfulness. My mom has these same qualities. My mom only needed a few words to get her point across, and always expressed herself with elegance and class, and out of love and concern for treating people right. She saw right to the essence of things, and she would not lose sight of it. Everyone trusted her judgment, her sound advice, her good perspective and experience. Mom, I speak for everyone when I say I miss you greatly. You are one of the righteous ones. I know your soul is looking down on us and will watch over us. You will always live close in our hearts. As Ben and Lily grow up to become responsible adults, people who love family and care for others, builders of the Jewish community and builders of the world, Mensches, they will know that this will bring you a lot of happiness. This is how you lived your life with values and purpose, and you have left us this heritage that makes us who we are. I love you, Mom.
Step up. Nice and slow.
Good morning, friends and family of my grandma Anita. I am Larry Levine, and this is my brother Harry. We are speaking today on behalf of Grandma Anita's 4 grandchildren, including Benjamin and Lily. Last year, I wrote an essay for school about Grandma Anita that I would like to share with you. This essay is very important to me because Grandma Anita and I worked on it together. When my grandma was 16 years old, she met President John F. Kennedy at the White House. She lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pierre Salinger was President Kennedy's press secretary. When Mr. Salinger came to Pittsburgh to give a speech, my grandma and her best friend Judy asked him after the speech if they could meet the president. He invited them to come to Washington the next day. My grandma and her friend took a bus to Washington that night and called Mr. Salinger at the White House the next morning. He had them come to his office in the White House. They spent the morning there as Mr. Salinger spoke to the television and newspaper reporters. Finally, around noon, Mr. Salinger said, "Okay, girls, the president can see you now." They were awestruck when Mr. Salinger walked them into the Oval Office to meet President Kennedy. The president shook their hand and had a photographer take a picture. He asked them about their high school. The president gave both of them charm bracelets. It was an experience my grandma treasures, and the charm bracelet reminds her of meeting a president she still admires very much. She compares every president since then to President Kennedy's courage, intelligence, and style. She loves to read his speeches and has a book with his inaugural speech she's saving for me. My grandma showed me the bracelet on a FaceTime call. And Judy is still her best friend 59 years after their adventure to meet President Kennedy. Last night, Grandpa Allen told my dad that when I go to his house today, he's going to give me the bracelet and the book with President Kennedy's inaugural speech. I will cherish them always, just as my grandma did, because they will remind me of her. I love her very much.
Switch. Okay, step up.
On Monday, I was in the park riding on my scooter. It was the same park that Grandma Anita took me to when she came to visit me. A beautiful butterfly landed on my helmet and stayed there for 10 seconds before it flew up to the sky. There were no other butterflies in the park that day. I think it was Grandma Anita saying goodbye to me on her way up to heaven.
Morning. My mother cut the crust off of my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, every single day, until I was 17. That's the kind of mother I have. And I say have, not had, quite consciously, because a mother like that carries you through life. Each morning from the first day of kindergarten through to senior year, Mom carefully packaged the same delicious and crustless sandwich in a brown paper lunch bag, along with all of the following: Milano cookies, a Ziploc bag filled with Cheetos, a pear cup, a Hershey Kiss, and a perfectly thawed Hawaiian punch wrapped in tin foil to keep the cold in from the freezer. The lunches my mom packed were celebrated at the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School for their consistency, their quality, and their quantity. Every single day for 12 years, the other kids swarmed me in the cafeteria, calling the extras on the Cheetos that I couldn't possibly finish or reasonably be expected to finish if I wanted to make it to the Milanos. And I knew that if I wasn't deep into the Milanos, by the time the 5-minute bell rang, I wasn't going to get to the pear cup. So the lunches were not something I took for granted, and I knew how good I had it when I had it. But now, 20, 30 years later, with kids of my own, they take on new meaning. They speak to the home and the life that my mom created for us: consistent, steady, safe, and utterly showered with love. In her own quiet way, my mother taught Max and me so much. She taught us the meaning of hard work. She worked on her feet as an art teacher all day, every day, for 40 years, with a lot of commentary about the lives of the other teachers at the school, but not a single complaint. Every year at the start of summer, I still hear her saying, "Get started on your summer reading list now, don't wait until the end." My mother taught us about the meaning of family. Her beloved sisters were mainstays. Their joys were her joys, and their pain was her pain. My mother also treated my dad's siblings and their children as her blood relatives. My mother taught us to be intellectually curious and creative. She had an incredible eye for detail. And my mother taught us to be as ambitious for ourselves as she was for us. To be clear, her ambition was that we be whomever we wanted to be and that we enjoy being it. As kids from a small suburban town, college opened up a lot of worlds for Max and me. She marveled at that. It's what she wanted for us, and she delighted in our venturing out into the world. But despite all that she taught us, perhaps her greatest feat as a parent was this: she put no pressure on us, but somehow naturally managed to show us how to rise to her expectations. My mom was the rare combo of an intellectual and an artist, and her greatest creation was the home that she and the life that she and my dad crafted for us, filled with paper mache, collage, silk screening, bike rides around the neighborhood circle, and of course, Nintendo. My mother's greatest joy in the world were the lives and the families that Max and I built for ourselves. Her grandkids were the center of her universe. My deepest regret is that she didn't have more time with them, but 2 weeks ago, Anita came up to the city and spent the whole weekend with her grandkids. She delighted in them, and they delighted in her. It was a glorious weekend of Monopoly, Parcheesi, chocolate chip pancakes, and soccer games. Reflecting on it now, I see that God gave her that final gift. She passed this week knowing that Max had just made partner, that I was building my business, that her grandkids were thriving. Although that can be comforting, it also makes it more tragic because there was so much more left for her to enjoy. I want to take a few moments to talk about the relationship between my mom and my dad. I think you'll get the picture with one fact. My mom never had her own email address. Now, don't get me wrong, she emailed all the time, but her emails came from Alan C. Levine at Comcast.net. Alan and Anita shared their life together in the fullest sense of the word shared. At breakfast or dinner, they had 1 cup of coffee. Dad would drink most of it, and when it cooled down, he would push it across the table, and she'd have a few sips at the end. When they went out, they basically ordered one meal. When you called one of them, you spoke to both of them. My mother was what you would call a universal donor. She gave and gave and gave so generously with her love. She gave to her family, to her work, to her friends. Now, I'm never going to be the person who cuts the crust off the sandwich, but Mom, I can promise you this. In your absence, I will love Dad, Max, our kids, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, and our friends, for both of us.
I want to say Yesher Koach and thank you to all of you for those really moving and beautiful and meaningful words, which is why I always like to speak last at a funeral when there are other people speaking, because honestly, even though many of those stories I didn't know until yesterday morning, I had heard them in our conversations yesterday morning as well, and these conversations really open up a new view of a person, and I find they're often helpful not only to me and to Rabbi Raphael in preparing our own thoughts, but helps the family prepare some thoughts as well. So my role this morning is to really put this in kind of a more explicitly Jewish context, and if possible, we like to connect what we see to the Parashat HaShavua, to the Torah portion of the week. And this week's parasha is Toldot. And the word Toldot means generations, and it also can mean descendants, depending on the context of how the word is used. And the parasha begins, these are the generations of Isaac, son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac. Judaism is really about generations. I mean, we live in America and everything is pigeonholed into a certain category. So if you ask most Americans what is Jewishness or Judaism, they'll say it's a religion. But it's not really a religion. It's certainly not just a religion. We really are a people with a religious component. And unlike the dominant religion in our society, Judaism is not about individual salvation. It's about taking your place in the chain of tradition that your ancestors handed to you and living in it and loving it and passing it on to the next generations. Toldot. Alan, Daniel, and Max all said to Rabbi Raphael and me yesterday morning that there was nothing more important to Anita than being part of a Jewish community and a Jewish family. And I would say that that's almost true with an emendation. There was actually nothing more important to her than her family. But beyond that, really being part of our community was really the most important thing to her. Alan and Anita provided Daniel and Max with the finest Jewish education available in our area, as you heard. And both of them speak Hebrew. They're involved in their respective synagogues. They have Jewish spouses and are raising Jewish children, Larry, Harry, Benjamin, and Lily, with the same passionate commitment to Jewish values and seeing the world through a Jewish compass with dedication to the idea of tikkun olam, that God has left the world imperfect and it's our job to fix what's wrong with it. Anita was truly a beloved person in our congregation, and her sudden passing much too young leaves all of us bereft. But we're grateful for her life, and we are confident that her and Alan's Toldot, their generations, will take what they have been given and pass it on to the future. Zichrona Livracha, the memory of Anita Levine is really a blessing for all of us. At this time, I want to call on our Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Mark Raphael, to share also a few thoughts, and then he'll recite the El Maleh Rachamim prayer at that time.
Try for 45 seconds unrabbinic. I've known Alan and Anita and Daniel and Max for a quarter of a century. When I think of Anita, I think of her mostly as someone who was pretty quiet, but when she spoke, it was thoughtful and articulate and always loving. Alan, 45 years. I know how busy you were with whatever you were doing with your tax expertise in all different kinds of ways. What's hard for me, though, is I can probably count on one hand the number of times you came to shul that she was not by your side. And I empathize with that sense of loss and that emptiness that you now have to experience. And thank God you got boys and grandkids to fill some of that. The great joy, as already mentioned, was her children, Daniel and Max. When she spoke, she literally glowed from the smile from her eyes, from her whole body. And when the grandkids were born, oh, you could hear the stories. A joy that was always tangible, an unconditional love that flowed and continues. As I was preparing this morning, I was looking through the Rabbi's Manual, and I found something I never used before. So especially for Max and Daniel, I share the following: parents as teachers. When parents who have taught their children pass on, that passing is not a complete death. As long as the child lives, there is a part of the parent that cannot die. When alive, a parent rejoices with children. In death, that parent will not grieve. We will grieve anyway. As part of that, we turn now to the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim, God full of compassion, and pray for Anita's soul. We'll ask everyone to rise for a moment for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamaromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, V'malot Kiddushim U'Teharim, Kezahar Rakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Chaya Bat Eliezer Mendel V'Leah Shalcha La'olama Began Eden Tehi Menuchata Anabal Harachamim Hastireha Beseter Kinafecha La'olamim Utzror B'tzrochem Et Nishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, the soul of Anita Bernstein Levine, who has gone to her eternal home. Masterful, merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest forever in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we will be proceeding to Garden of Remembrance Memorial Park in Clarksburg, Maryland. Those of you who are able to join us after we bring Mrs. Levine out, please return to your vehicles as quickly as possible. Put on your bright headlights and four-way flashers so you'll be better recognized as part of our funeral procession. And we will also give you an orange tag to hang on your rearview mirror. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, would the pallbearers please come forward? We're going to go to the left where there's a ramp.
El Maleh Rachamim Shochen Bamaromim Hamitzeh Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kiddushim U'Teharim Kezahar Rakia Mazhirim Et nishmat Chaya bat Eliezer Mendel V'Leah shalcha la'olama V'gan Eden tehi menuchata Ana bal harachamim Hastireha b'seter Kinafecha l'olamim Utzror b'tzrochem et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, the soul of Anita Bernstein Levine, who has gone to her eternal home. Masterful, merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest forever in peace. And let us say, Amen.